Hi friends, and welcome to another video. It's Simon Hurley from Eclipse here, and I hope you all are having an awesome day. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at the new Nuvo Watercolor Pencils. I was told these pencils are super pigmented, so I wanted to put that to the test today. I've got three different types of cardstocks here. I've got regular white watercolor cardstock, and then you've got kind of the mid-tone, which is the Kraft cardstock. And then also I'm going to be testing it on the black cardstock too. So as you watch the video, I was learning as you guys were, so you'll see some of my tests and some of my mistakes, and I'll walk you through how they react on each type of cardstock so you can see how pigmented they really are. So let's turn down to my work surface and get started. Alright, so for the first card here, I'm going to be playing with the watercolor pencils on just regular watercolor paper. So I'm using the Hero Arts Color Layering Swallowtail stamp set. And even though this is a layering set, I'm just going to use the lined images so I can color them in on my card. So it gets a little bit more use out of those layering sets. Then I'm going to grab the Nuvo Clear Mark ink pad and I'm going to stamp out my scene. And this is a clear sticky ink, so it'll help the embossing powder stick in just a second here. So after I'm done stamping my image down, I'm going to then bring in my embossing powder quickly and a little sheet of cardstock so I can funnel it all back into it. And I'm using Nuvo Black Detail Embossing Powder here. I find that when you sprinkle on your embossing powder in between layers, you're able to see what you stamped, so then I can help finish off my scene a little bit better. So then here I'm going to stamp down two little flowers in the corner. And because this ink is hard to see, after every step that I stamped down, I then sprinkled over the embossing powder and kept stamping. So after I've sprinkled that on the flowers there, I'm going to move on to the sentiment. And I stamped that down again in the clear sticky ink because I want everything to match with that black embossing powder. And also, when you're working with the watercolor pencils, since they are so pigmented, you want to make sure that you emboss them, or I like to emboss them just because the line stays super nice and crisp then. So I'll do that on all of today's cards. So then I'm going to heat that up so it's nice and shiny, and then I can start my coloring here. So when I'm adding my color onto my cardstock here, I'm just going to kind of scribble the color on lightly. You don't want to press too hard into the cardstock or the pencil lines won't disappear when you add water to it. So I'm just scribbling on the color. It doesn't really matter how it looks right now because I'm going to be watering it out with the water brush in just a second here. So you can scribble on the color however little or much you want. I just add it to the parts where I want the color to be the darkest, and that way it creates kind of a shadow effect there and it creates more dimension when you're coloring. So I wanted to create a sparkly butterfly here, so I'm just bringing in this Nuvo Aqua Flow Shimmer pen, and this will add that shimmer to my color while blending it out here. So I believe this is water-based because it blends out that color really nicely, and you'll kind of see me wipe off my brush to the side there. I have a little sheet of cardstock there, and if I don't want the two colors to blend a ton, I'll wipe off the brush to the side so I can start again clean with a new color. So I don't want that blue and yellow to completely blend, so I just wipe off my brush in between the colors so that they don't mix too much together. So then after I've added that on there, this shimmer will stay on there, and you can't really see it in the video too much, but it is really impactful in real life. So I'll scribble a little bit of that brown color onto the body of the butterfly and blend that out again with that shimmer pen there. So now I'm going to add a little bit of color onto these flowers. Again, just kind of scribbling the color, and I'm doing it where the inside of those flowers will have the darkest color there, so that'll create a little bit of dimension on my card. And then I'll go in with a lighter color as well, and just really lightly add that color to the outside of the petals. So then this is my regular water brush here. So it's just got normal water inside of it, and I can then add water to there and kind of fade out that color. Now you want to make sure to add your color before the paper gets wet. You can also add color while the paper is wet, but it's way harder to blend out the color like that, and you kind of get some scratch marks in your cardstock, which can be the look you're going for, but I decided to just add all my color before I added my water down onto the cardstock. So then you can see on the center of those flowers there, I added a little bit of brown pencil, and then I'll blend that out. And I kind of brought that into the yellow there so that it kind of muddied up that color and created a little bit of a darker tone. Now once those images are all colored in, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of color onto the background. So I'm taking this light blue colored pencil and I'm going to really super lightly scribble some color around these images here. And again, you don't want to make it look perfect. You don't want to take the time to do that because it's all going to be blended out in just a second. And I also snuck in a couple other colors in the background too. So then I'm going to grab my water brush and just water this all out. And you can kind of see me blotting off a little color if it gets too dark. And when I go around those flower images there, I just kind of go up right to the edge and then stop my color there so that it doesn't run into those other flowers. And if it gets a little too dark in areas, I'll blot it off right with my fingers there. So then I'm just going to continue watering out that background, and you can see it gives a really light effect, so you could add some more color if you wanted to, but I kind of love how it turned out, and the color's more visible in real life. So there's that card with just the regular watercolor cardstock here, and I really love how vibrant those are just on the regular cardstock. Now I wanted to share that I just chopped this little piece down on both sides. I cut a little piece of that Tonic glimmer paper as well. I wanted some extra sparkle here. So I added that onto a top folding card base with a little bit of a border on both sides. And then I'm cutting down that little portion. If anything hangs off the card, I keep this little mini trimmer on my desk to just chop those little portions off and make it all straight. And then I'm going to add that little strip of glitter cardstock on the side of the card to kind of finish everything off and tie it all together. So you can really see that vibrant color on that butterfly there, and some of that more muted color from the muted skin tone kind of pack on those flowers, which I really love how that looks. So now moving on to the next card, I'm going to test out these colored pencils on Kraft cardstock. So we'll see how it works on here, with this not being a watercolor cardstock. So I'm using a color layering rabbit set here, and again I'm just using all the lined images from this set. So I'm going to stamp that down again in the clear mark ink pad, and then I'm going to grab some hot chocolate embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that right over top of here. So again, I just like using embossing powder to make sure the lines are really crisp, but once again, you can just stamp down the image, and if you have that Tonic stamping tool too, you can stamp down the image, then color, and then stamp it down again, and it'll go in the exact same spot. So that's also pretty helpful too. Now I wiped off some of the embossing powder here, but I wanted to make the little bunny hold some carrots. So I stamped down those carrots, and then where those embossing powder lines met, I just scraped off some of it with this little pokey tool from Holtz and Tonic. And this just helps to get rid of some of that powder, and it's kind of my lazy way of masking these images off. So after I've done that, I'm going to heat set all those little images there and the sentiment, and then we're ready to start our coloring with the colored pencils. So I'm going to bring out the sets here, and I wanted to see how this white colored pencil worked on this cardstock here. So I'm just scribbling it down kind of lightly again. I don't want to make any scratch marks in the cardstock here, and I want it to blend out nicely afterwards. So I'm just scribbling on where there would be shadows, so where kind of the bunny's legs meet and then the arms, just kind of have fun with it and add some color down. And then I also snuck in some browns there and grays as well to kind of add to the shaded effect. And I kind of added a little bit of a fur texture there too. So once I did that, I also added some color to the carrots and the stems of the carrots, just because I didn't want to mess with having water there and not being able to blend it out. So then I'm going to blend this out, and I was a little confused at first. It kind of just made the color disappear and made the cardstock a little bit darker. So I was a little concerned on how it was turning out, and I didn't know if I loved the results right away. But you'll see in just a second here how it all turns out. And then I watered those carrots down, and they stayed really nice and vibrant, but again, the cardstock turned kind of dark where I added the water there. So you can barely see where that white colored pencil was. So then I got a little scared, and I added some more color in here. So I added a little bit of yellow and golden tones because I wanted to make the rabbit a little bit more warm colored too. So I added those on top and added some color inside of its ear. And then I'm going to water that out again. And I'm going to add my color there. Oh, actually, I did go in and add a little bit more white colored pencil here. A little bit darker since I was kind of light-handed in the beginning. So then I'm going to add a little bit more water to the surface there. And again, it kind of turns dark and the color kind of disappears, but you'll see kind of what I figure out about that in just a second here. The colored pencils are working. Now I also just quickly wanted to mention that because this Kraft cardstock isn't a watercolor paper, you want to be careful with it and not blend it out too much here. So you'll see I just kind of ran my brush over that and didn't do any more strokes until it's all dried. And that's because it will kind of peel the paper and kind of break it down if you add too much water onto it because it's not a watercolor cardstock. So then I did the same thing here and just added some white colored pencil over top of that sentiment, and I snuck a couple other colors in there as well. So after that, I watered down the sentiment there too, and again, the watercolor pencil just kind of disappears and makes the cardstock darker. But I did add a little bit more of that white colored pencil there, so it is still pretty visible in that sentiment. But I'll kind of go through what's happening here in just a second. So then I'm doing the land here in that green color, and I'll add little sprigs of grass here and there along the grass. And you can kind of see my bunny color is returning here, and same kind of with the sentiment there. But after I've added that color, I'm going to go in and water it down, and the color stayed pretty vibrant, but again it turns that cardstock the darker color. I was kind of confused here at first, but I figured it out in just a second here. So I'm going to blend all that color out into the background and kind of smooth that out without working the paper too much. And then after I've done that, this is kind of where I figured it out. So after adding more color there, I watered that back down and the cardstock turned that darker color again. But I wanted to bring my heat tool and show you what's happening here. So you can see as that water disappears, it leaves all that pigment there. So if you look at my bunny now, there's lots of white and color there and along that sentiment as well. So it all shows back up once you're done and once the watercolor paper is all heated or just dried regularly. So I'm cutting those ends off there, cutting this panel down and adding it onto a top folding card base there. So that's the finished card for this one, and I like how that turned out too. You get that really nice color there with that pigment, even though it looks like it didn't appear right away. It appears after just a little while after it's all dried. So moving on to this last one with the black cardstock here, I think this one turned out to be my favorite. I'm using this wood block stamp from Hero Arts, and I love that little flower with lots of detail there. So I'm using this to do my coloring for the card on the black cardstock here. So I'm inking this up once again with that clear mark ink pad, and this time, instead of just stamping one image, I took the image, stamped it down, and then I'll take some gold embossing powder from Nuvo, and I'm going to sprinkle that right over top, and I'm going to create a whole background with this flower. So after I know where that image is, after I've sprinkled that down, I'm going to then tap off the excess, and I'm going to stamp the image again, lining it up along the side of the cardstock, and I'm going to create a full background to these flowers. So I'm just looking kind of where that rubber meets the edge there, and I'll put my head down and stamp down that image there, and then I'm going to sprinkle on the embossing powder again, and continue doing that until the whole background is all filled up with these flowers. So after that, I'm going to tap off any of that excess powder that's on there, funnel it all back into the jar, and then I can heat set this embossing powder here until it's nice and shiny. So you get that fun gold embossing on top of that black cardstock, which I think looks really elegant. So after I've heated that up, I'm going to add my colored pencil on here. So again, I'm just adding it pretty lightly onto the cardstock here. And at this point, I kind of knew it was going to work, sort of, because you can see how well that colored pencil is going on there, and you can see that pigment pretty nicely there. So I'm just shading around the edges, and wherever there's lines in the stamp set, I shaded along those, so it kind of helps when the stamp is drawn to add those little lines in, so it kind of helps out with the shading there. I'm also going in with some of those darker colors, so I'm adding this maroon-like color here, and I'll also add a brighter pink color and a red color as well to the center, because I knew those were going to kind of help it be brighter as well, but it did end up doing a really good job. So after I've added all these colors down onto the cardstock here, again, not really worrying about it too much, and later on you'll see that I added the colors on a little bit quicker, I'll start watering this down, and kind of like that brown cardstock, the color kind of disappears and it doesn't look like anything too marvelous right away. It just looks like a little bit of chalk on some black cardstock. So I'm just going to water this down and blend it all around, making sure you hit every edge and part of the stamp there. And then after I've done that, I'm going to go in with my green colored pencils and just kind of go around those leaves and quickly shade those in as well. And I added a little bit of darker color here. It does make a little bit of a difference because you can kind of see the different tones, but if you just go in with one color, that's completely alright as well. So after I've done that, I'm going to water those down as well, and every time I move into a different color, I clean off my brush in between. So here it especially just looks like regular cardstock. And again, you don't want to work it too much because this isn't the watercolor paper, so I'm just adding a little layer of water down to kind of blend it all out. So here I've sped up my video a little bit. You can see I'm really just scribbling in the color super quick there. I wish I could color this fast. And then as I'm doing this, you can kind of see that other flower drying, and you can see that color really coming back into surface there. It's not completely dry yet, but once it is, the color really pops on that cardstock. So I'm going to quickly shade the rest of these flowers in, and then I'll add some of that color for the green leaves as well after I'm done. And by adding all these different colors in, I think it makes a little bit of a difference. You can see a little bit of that shading in that first flower there, especially with that darker red. I think that really helped make that pop. So then I'm going to blend these all out again with that water brush, and I'm just going all the way up to the edges. Now I think these flowers would also be kind of fun to use that Aqua Flow shimmer pen with. Then you get that nice shimmery result, but it won't come off on your hands, but you get that fun shimmer for these flowers. So I think that would also be fun to try that out with these. So I'm just blending these out, and it looks kind of chalky right now, but again, once it dries, the color really just comes to life on this cardstock. So I'm quickly watering those leaves down as well, and I'm just staying inside the lines here, but as I color, you want to make sure you get all the way to the edges, because then the color will kind of spread out and move along your water that you're adding. So I'm going to heat set all of these, and you can really see that color coming back as I heat set these, and it really pops off the surface of that cardstock as it's drying. So you can see you kind of get that chalky effect, but I really like how that color turns out. It kind of pops against that black cardstock, and you get that nice vibrant color there too. And in real life, it's just stunning. So to kind of go along with that chalk kind of look, I added a little bit of white around the edges of each one of these flowers. So really quickly just scribbled a little bit of that color, just like I did in the first example with that blue pencil. But here I'm just quickly scribbling along, kind of making a border along each flower here. And then I'll blend that out with my water brush again, just adding a little bit of water to the whole thing, and the color kind of disappears here, but once I add that heat, you'll really see this one come to life. And I found that these pencils don't need much water to help them blend out either, which is super nice because it only takes a little bit, and you don't have to work the cardstock a ton to get that color to move. So after I've moved all that little white color around, I'm going to then take in my heat tool here, and you can see it kind of getting rid of all that water and drying it really nicely. But then that white color comes back and really creates that kind of chalkboard look where it's a little bit darker around the edges of the flowers and kind of lighter in the center of all the rest of the image here. So I think this background turned out really cool, and I love the results. So after I'm done that, I'm going to take this little mini trimmer again, and I'm just going to cut off the edges so it'll leave a little bit of a border around the card base here. So I'll just chop those off, and I like to keep this little trimmer on my desk just because I find it helpful to cut off little edges and things like that. Instead of using a large trimmer, this is just nice and convenient. So here I went in with a white gel pen. I didn't quite have a sentiment, so I decided to do my handwriting here. It was kind of a large leap. I didn't want to ruin the cardstock here. I knew I could cover it up if I didn't like it, but I ended up just writing hello in kind of a scripty handwriting, and I like how it turned out in the end. So I kept it and added it onto a white top folding card base, and that finishes off this card. So here's an up-close look at that last card there, and I really like how this one turned out with those really bold colors on that black cardstock, and I like my little handwritten sentiment as well. Alright, so what'd you guys think? I hope you really enjoyed that video and learned a little bit more about how these Nuvo watercolor pencils react on different types of cardstocks. Be sure to leave me a comment down below letting me know which cardstock was your favorite with the pencils. And also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below if you want to join the Inklips family and never miss another fun crafty video like this one. And there's also a little bell icon next to the subscribe button. If you click that, you'll get all my notifications for when I post a new video. I hope you guys will have an awesome day, and I'll see you very soon for another card making and crafting video. Bye!